My sister and her husband moved in with our parents, expecting free childcare as part of the deal. When I refused to babysit their unruly kids on demand, they acted like I had betrayed them. Every conversation turned into guilt-tripping, sighs, and dramatic complaints about how families should help each other. Meanwhile, I watched them dump responsibility onto our exhausted parents while they relaxed. One day, after yet another demand to watch the kids, I calmly said, "Your children, your problem." Now they barely speak to me, but honestly, I've never felt more at peace. Their silence was supposed to make me feel guilty, but instead, it felt like a gift. No more sudden knocks on my door, no more guilt-tripping texts, no more passive-aggressive sighs. At first, our parents tried to mediate. "They're struggling. Just help a little." But I had seen them struggle while scrolling on their phones as our parents handled everything. I wasn't falling for it. Then came the tantrums. My sister ranted about how I was selfish, how I was destroying the family. Her husband, who barely spoke to me before, suddenly had an opinion too. Something about not understanding what it means to sacrifice. I just smiled and said, "You moved in with our parents, not with me." That shut them up. Now they scramble to find actual babysitters, complain about the cost, and look increasingly frustrated that their free labor pool has dried up. Meanwhile, I enjoy my peace, my time, and the knowledge that I refused to be their unpaid nanny. The silence didn't last long. My sister and her husband weren't the type to let go easily, especially when they still believed they were owed something. One evening, I came home to find my parents looking uncomfortable. My mom sighed and said, "They left the kids here and went out." I froze. "What?" "They said they'd be back in a few hours," Dad muttered. "But it's been 5. Rage simmered beneath my skin. They dumped their kids here, assuming someone, probably me, would just deal with it. That was the final straw. I pulled out my phone and texted my sister, "You have 10 minutes to pick up your kids before I call the police for child abandonment." Read. No reply. So I called. It rang twice before she answered, laughing in the background like she wasn't about to have the worst night of her life. "Ugh, you're so dramatic." 5 minutes. I hung up. Suddenly, they weren't so relaxed anymore. They rushed back furious. "How could you even think of calling the police? We're family." I smiled. "Exactly. So start acting like it." Since that night, they've never tried it again. And me? I sleep like a baby, knowing I finally put an end to their entitled nonsense. Game over. A week passed with blissful silence. No guilt tripis, no inchidlid de months, no surprise babichingskas. I thought they had finally learned their lesson. I was wrong. One evening, I came home to find my door slightly open. My stomach dropped. I always locked it. Always. I stepped inside cautiously, heart pounding. The lights were off, but I could hear movement in the kitchen. And then I saw them. My sister, her husband, their kids, sitting at my table, eating my food, like they lived here. I stood frozen in the doorway. My sister looked up mid-bite, and had the audacity to roll her eyes. "Oh, you're back." I blinked. "What the hell?" Her husband leaned back in my chair like he belonged there. "Your parents weren't home. We figured we'd wait here." "Wait? In my locked apartment?" My sister sighed dramatically. "We needed a break. The kids were being a nightmare." She took another bite of my food. "You weren't here, so we just let ourselves in." Let themselves in. I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. "How did you get in?" She waved a hand. "Mom gave me a spare key a while back." Chill. I saw red. They had been using my place as their personal escape whenever they wanted. I walked over to the counter, grabbed my phone, and, without a word, dialed a locksmith. My sister frowned. "What are you doing?" I smiled sweetly. "Changing the locks." Her mouth dropped open. "Wait, you're serious?" Her husband scoffed. "You're overreacting." I stared at them. "Get out. Now." My sister huffed, grabbed her kids, and stormed out, muttering about how selfish I was. Her husband? He sneered. "Family's supposed to help each other." I smiled. "Exactly. So stop using me like a free Airbnb." As soon as they left, the locksmith arrived. I changed the locks, blocked their numbers, and poured myself a glass of wine. The next day my parents called. Your sister is furious. She says you embarrassed her. I laughed. Good. Maybe now she'll learn boundaries. They weren't happy, but I didn't care. Because for the first time in years, I was free. Or so I thought. Because 2 days later, my sister did something I never saw coming. She tried to have me evicted. I thought I had won. The locks were changed, my boundaries were clear, and for the first time in ages, my sister and her husband were out of my life. Then I got a letter. At first, I thought it was junk mail. Until I saw the sender. My landlord. I ripped it open, my eyes scanning the words quickly. Notice of lease violation, complaints from co-tenants, unauthorized guests, possible eviction proceedings. I froze. My sister. She was trying to get me kicked out. Fury burned through me as I dialed my landlord. What complaints? What unauthorized guests? He sighed. A man claiming to be your brother-in-law came by. Said you've been letting people stay illegally and causing disturbances. Another woman called and said you'd threaten her kids. Oh. She played dirty. I laughed. A cold, dangerous laugh. She thought she could outplay me? Fine. Game on. I spent the next 2 days gathering proof. Security camera footage from the building entrance, showing them sneaking in when I wasn't home. Text messages of my sister demanding free babysitting. Screenshots of her admitting to breaking into my place. Then I went a step further. I filed a police report for trespassing. I sent copies of everything to my landlord, along with a final note. I am the victim here. If my lease is threatened because of their lies, I will pursue legal action. It worked. My landlord called back apologetic. Consider the complaint dismissed. I smiled. Chegmata, cease. Then, because I wasn't done yet, I sent her a text. Me nice try. Hope you're ready for what's next. No reply. Until the next morning, when I woke up to an entire Facebook post from her, ranting about how I had betrayed family, how I was evil and cruel. She wanted attention. She got it. Because the comments were not on her side. Wait, didn't you break into her place? Why are you mad she won't raise your kids for you? She had every right to kick you out. She thought she'd humiliate me. Instead, she humiliated herself. The best part, a week later my parents called. Your sister and her husband are moving out. We can't take it anymore. I grinned. Oh, why's that? Mom sighed. They expected us to babysit 24/7. We're exhausted. I laughed. I warned them. And with that, peace was finally mine. Or at least, that's what I thought. Because then, out of nowhere, my sister tried one last move. She sued me. I almost choked on my coffee when I saw the letter. A lawsuit. From my sister. For emotional distress and defamation. I actually laughed. Out loud. In the middle of my kitchen. She had tried to have me evicted, slandered me online, and used my home like a daycare. And now she wanted money? Oh, this was going to be fun. I called a lawyer. When I explained the situation, there was a long pause before he asked, "Is she serious?" "Oh, she's serious," I said, grinning. "But don't worry. So am I." I gathered everything: texts, emails, security footage, the police report I filed for trespassing. I even included screenshots of her own Facebook post, where she publicly admitted to breaking into my place. When my lawyer saw the evidence, he smirked. Yeah, she's screwed. We went to court 3 weeks later. My sister and her husband showed up looking smug, as if they had already won. She put on the performance of a lifetime. Fake tears, dramatic sighs, talking about how my cruelty had ruined her life. Then it was my turn. I let my lawyer do the talking. The security footage, the police report, the eviction attempt, the harassment, the Facebook meltdown. By the time we were done, my sister's face was red. Her husband looked like he wanted to disappear. And the judge? The judge was pissed. Verdict? Case dismissed. And since her claim was frivolous, the judge ordered her to pay my legal fees. Her jaw dropped. She owed me money. She stormed out furious, her husband dragging her behind him. I walked out with a smirk and a newfound sense of victory. Game over. Now, she doesn't speak to me. Not a single word. My parents. They finally see her for who she really is. They no longer let her push them around. And for the first time, they're actually standing up for themselves. And me? I'm living my best life, drama-free, sister-free, and absolutely at peace. Because in the end, she tried to play me. Months passed. Peace settled into my life like a long-lost friend. No more surprise babysitting, no more dramatic phone calls, no more chaos. Until one day, she came back. I was at home, enjoying a quiet evening, when my phone buzzed. A message from my sister. I almost ignored it. But curiosity won. "Sister, we need to talk. It's important." I stared at the screen. "After everything?" A minute later, another text. "Sister, please." I sighed, against my better judgment, and agreed to meet her at a coffee shop the next morning. She showed up alone. No husband. No kids. Just her looking different. Tired. She sat down, fidgeting with her cup. I messed up. I said nothing. Just waited. She exhaled sharply. "He left." I blinked. "Oh." Her lips pressed together. "My husband. He took off. Left me with the kids, no money, no job. Nothing." For the first time ever, my sister looked defeated. And for the first time ever, I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt something else. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked carefully. She swallowed hard. "Because I have nowhere else to go." A long silence stretched between us. Then her eyes met mine. "I need your help." I exhaled slowly. She had spent years trying to use me, hurt me, betray me. But now, she was at rock bottom, and I had a choice: help her or walk away for good. I leaned back, staring at my sister, the woman who had once made my life hell. Then I made my decision. I took a slow sip of my coffee, studying her. This was her moment of reckoning. The same woman who tried to use me as free childcare, tried to have me evicted, sued me for emotional distress, and humiliated herself in front of a judge. Now she was begging. And she knew it. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped her cup. She wasn't faking this time. There was no performance, no guilt-tripping, no entitlement. Just desperation. I could have said no. I could have walked away and left her to deal with the mess she made. But I didn't. Instead, I leaned in, voice calm. "You need my help?" She nodded quickly. "Yes. I don't have anyone else." I tilted my head. "And tell me, why should I help you?" Her mouth opened, then closed. She had no answer. I smiled. "That's what I thought." I pulled out my wallet, placed a single $20 bill on the table, and slid it toward her. "This is the only help you're getting from me." Her face paled. "Wait, what?" I stood up, grabbing my bag. "Figure it out. Just like I did." She stared at the money, then up at me, realization dawning in her eyes. I wasn't going to save her. I walked out without looking back. And that was the last time I ever saw her. A year passed. No calls. No texts. No drama. I had almost forgotten about her. Until one evening I got a letter. No return address. Just my name. I hesitated before opening it, expecting some last-ditch plea for help. But inside was something else. A single check. For $5,000. And a short note. "You were right. I had to figure it out." And I did. No hard feelings. No signature. I stared at the paper, processing. My sister, the same woman who once tried to destroy my life, had finally grown up. And for the first time I smiled. Because in the end, I stared at the check, debating whether to catch it or tear it up. But before I could decide, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I hesitated, then answered, and a familiar voice spoke. "I know we're not the same people we used to be. But maybe we could start over?" My sister. The woman who once tried to ruin me. Now reaching out like a stranger seeking redemption. For a moment I considered hanging up, walking away forever. But instead I took a slow breath and said, "Let's see." Because maybe, just maybe, some battles don't end with winners and losers, just change. Weeks passed after that phone call. I kept replaying her words in my head. Can people really change? Does she deserve another chance? The memories of old betrayals still hurt. But I couldn't help but wonder who she had become after everything that happened. One day I gathered my thoughts and texted her. "We can meet. Just to talk. No promises." Her reply was almost instant. "Thank you. I don't deserve this, but thank you." We agreed to meet at the same cafe where we last saw each other. I arrived early, more nervous than I wanted to admit. But when I saw her, I barely recognized her. She looked thinner, her face was tired, but the defiance was gone from her eyes. All I saw was vulnerability. She sat down across from me, her eyes lowered. I wouldn't blame you if you hated me. I don't hate you, I replied, keeping my voice steady. But I can't forget everything you did. She nodded. I know. And I'm not even asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know. I've really changed. I'm working. I rent a small apartment. The kids are in daycare. I finally understand what it means to take responsibility for my own life. We sat in silence for a moment before she added, I'm not asking us to be best friends. I just want to have my sister back. Even if we only see each other once a year. Even if you never fully forgive me. Her words melted some of the ice around my heart. She really had changed. Not perfectly. Not without flaws. But she had finally grown up. I took a deep breath and said, let's try. Slowly. No promises. But let's try. Her eyes glistened with tears, but she held them back. She just nodded and whispered, thank you. We sat a little longer talking about the kids' work life. And for the first time in years, the conversation wasn't clouded by resentment or manipulation. It was genuine. Time would tell if we could rebuild our relationship. But I was willing to give it a chance. Want me to continue? We can explore how their relationship develops, add new conflicts, or even show how they learn to be a family again. Over the next few months, we took things slow. First, it was just the occasional text message. Simple things like, how are the kids? Or, hope your week's going well. It felt strange, almost awkward, but it was a start. Eventually, we met up again, this time at a park. She brought her kids, and for the first time I saw a side of her I'd never noticed before. She was patient with them, tired but attentive, doing her best to keep them happy with what little she had. We sat on a bench watching her children play. She looked over at me, her face a mixture of guilt and hope. I'm trying, she said softly. I don't always get it right. But I'm trying. I looked at her, really looked at her. There were dark circles under her eyes, a wariness in her posture. But there was also a determination I hadn't seen before. I can see that, I replied. From that day, things started to change. I let her into my life bit by bit. We began meeting up more regularly, sharing meals, talking about things we'd missed out on for so many years. It wasn't perfect. There were awkward silences and moments where old wounds resurfaced. But we were healing. Then one evening, my parents invited us both over for dinner. It was the first time the whole family would be together since everything had happened. I was nervous. Would old arguments resurface? Would resentment ruin the evening? When I arrived, my sister was already there, helping Mom set the table. She looked up, her eyes meeting mine with a hint of worry. I gave her a small nod, letting her know it was okay. Her shoulders relaxed, and she managed a shy smile. Dinner started off tense. The light conversation forced smiles. But then my niece accidentally spilled her drink, and for a moment we all froze. Then my sister laughed, really laughed, a genuine unguarded sound that echoed through the room. She's just like me, she said, shaking her head. Always clumsy. The tension shattered, and before I knew it, we were all laughing. The evening became lighter, more natural. We started sharing stories, reminiscing about our childhood, teasing each other like we used to. Later that night, as we were leaving, my sister pulled me aside. Her eyes were filled with tears, but this time they were tears of gratitude. Thank you for giving me another chance, she whispered. I don't deserve it. But thank you. I hugged her, holding back my own tears. We're not perfect. But we're family. We'll figure it out. From then on, things got better. Slowly but surely. We were learning how to be sisters again, one day at a time. Would you like to see how their relationship continues to grow? Or maybe dive into new challenges they might face along the way? Let me know how you'd like the story to unfold. Months passed, and my sister and I continued to rebuild our relationship. It wasn't easy. Some days were better than others. But each step forward felt like a victory. We were learning how to trust each other again. One Saturday afternoon, she invited me over to her apartment for lunch. It was small but cozy, filled with signs of her new life, children's drawings on the fridge, toys neatly organized in bins, and a calendar on the wall with her work shifts carefully marked. She was juggling a lot, but she was managing. We sat at her tiny kitchen table, eating sandwiches and laughing about old memories. Then, out of nowhere, she looked down, her fingers nervously tracing circles on her plate. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. I braced myself. "Okay." She took a deep breath. "I got a call from him." I felt my stomach drop. "Your ex?" She nodded. "He wants to come back. Says he's changed. That he wants to be a father again." I stared at her, searching her face for any sign of doubt. Her eyes were guarded, her shoulders tense. "Do you believe him?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. She hesitated. "I don't know. Part of me wants to. For the kids. But another part of me." I remember how he left. How he didn't care about us until it was convenient. I reached across the table, placing my hand on hers. "You've built a life without him. You've proven you don't need him. But if you're considering letting him back in, make sure it's because you want to, not because you feel you have to." Her eyes filled with tears and she nodded, squeezing my hand. "I'm scared. I don't want to make another mistake." We sat in silence for a while, just holding hands. For the first time, she wasn't trying to manipulate me, and I wasn't keeping my guard up. We were just sisters trying to figure out life together. A week later, she called me, her voice steadier. I told him no. I told him if he really wants to be in their lives, he needs to prove it. "I'm not letting him back in until I'm sure." Pride swelled in my chest. "Good. You deserve better. And so do they. I wouldn't have had the strength to do it without you," she admitted softly. "Thank you for believing in me." From that moment on, I knew things were truly changing. She was no longer the entitled, manipulative person she once was. She was stronger, wiser, and she was becoming someone I was proud to call my sister. But life wasn't done testing us just yet. Because just when things seemed to be falling into place, something happened that neither of us saw coming. Would you like to see what happens next? I can keep the story going, adding new challenges, emotional moments, or even unexpected twists. Just let me know. Things were finally settling down. My sister was standing on her own 2 feet, the kids were adjusting well, and we were slowly becoming a real family again. Felt good, better than I could have imagined. But life has a funny way of throwing curveballs just when you least expect them. One evening, I was getting ready for bed when my phone buzzed. It was a text from my sister. "Can you come over? It's an emergency." My heart skipped a beat. I didn't even reply. I just grabbed my keys and rushed to her apartment. When she opened the door, her face was pale, eyes wide with fear. "He took them," she whispered, her voice shaking. I froze. "Who took who?" "Their father. He came to visit. And then he just took them. I told him he could see them for an hour, but he never came back." My blood ran cold. "Did you call the police?" She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "They said they can't do anything yet because technically he's their father. And we never went to court. He still has legal rights." I wrapped my arms around her as she broke down, sobbing. I felt rage boiling inside me. He abandoned them when it was convenient and now thought he could just waltz back in and take them? No, not on my watch. We spent the night calling his relatives, his friends, anyone who might know where he took the kids. No one would tell us anything. It was like he vanished off the face of the earth. The next morning, I took my sister to a lawyer. We explained everything, and the lawyer's face grew serious. "This is going to be messy," he warned. "You'll need to file for emergency custody. But even then it could take time." My sister looked at me, panic in her eyes. "What if he takes them out of state? What if I never see them again?" I grabbed her hand, holding it tight. "We're not giving up. We're going to fight this. Together." The days that followed were a nightmare. Waiting for the court date, not knowing where the kids were, not hearing their voices. My sister barely slept, barely ate. Every time her phone buzzed, she jumped, hoping it was news about her children. Finally, the court date arrived. We stood before the judge, our lawyer arguing that he was a flight risk, that he had no right to take the kids without notice. Her ex showed up, smug and defiant, claiming he was just spending time with his kids. The judge listened carefully, then looked directly at him. "You have no right to withhold them from their mother. Return them immediately or face kidnapping charges." His face went pale. He stammered, trying to defend himself, but the judge's decision was final. That evening he brought the kids back. My sister ran to them, hugging them so tightly they squealed. Tears of relief streamed down her face. I watched from a distance, my heart finally unclenching. They were home. They were safe. But as her ex walked away, he glared at me, his eyes burning with resentment. "This isn't over," he hissed. I didn't flinch. I just stood my ground, meeting his gaze. "You're right. It's not. Because now we're going to court. And this time, you won't get another chance to run." My sister filed for full custody the next day. And this time she was ready to fight. No more fear. No more giving in. She was stronger than ever before. But the battle was just beginning. And we had no idea how far he was willing to go to get what he wanted. Would you like to see how this custody battle unfolds? There's so much more we can explore. Courtroom drama, emotional reunions, and the ultimate test of my sister's newfound strengths. Just say the word, and I'll keep the story going. The custody battle was brutal. Weeks turned into months of court hearings, lawyer meetings, and emotional testimonies. Her ex fought dirty, bringing up every mistake my sister ever made, twisting the truth to paint her as an unfit mother. But she stood her ground, refusing to be intimidated. I was by her side every step of the way. We gathered evidence, brought in character witnesses, and proved beyond a doubt that she had changed. She was no longer the irresponsible woman who once relied on everyone else. She was strong, independent, and determined to protect her children. The final court hearing was tense. Her ex was defiant, insisting he was the better parent. But my sister's voice was steady as she looked the judge in the eye and said, "I made mistakes. I own them. But I've changed because my children deserve better. I won't let them down again." The courtroom fell silent as the judge reviewed the evidence. My sister's hands were trembling as she held mine, her eyes glued to the judge's face. Finally he spoke. Full custody awarded to the mother. Supervised visitation rights to the father. Tears streamed down her face as she let out a shaky breath, relief washing over her. We hugged, both of us crying, feeling the weight of this battle finally lift. The kids were safe. They were staying with her, where they belonged. Her ex stormed out, his threats echoing in the hallway. But they were just words. He had lost. And he knew it. Walking out of the courthouse, my sister looked at me, her eyes red but shining with determination. "I couldn't have done this without you." I smiled, squeezing her hand. "Yes, you could have. But I'm glad you didn't have to." That night, we sat together watching her children play, their laughter filling the room. My sister leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, "I finally feel free." I hugged her, feeling the same peace settle in my heart. Me too. We had been through hell and back. We faced betrayal, fear, and heartbreak. But we also found strength, forgiveness, and the courage to fight for the people we love. No more manipulation. No more drama. Just healing, hope, and a future worth fighting for. Together we were finally home. The end.